Commander Zill looked at the prisoner inside the glass cell and laughed. "Do not waste your energy, little soft skin," he said. "This cage is made of steel. It can survive the heat of a star. It stops laser cannons. You can never escape." Jack, the human miner, ignored him. He looked closely at the lock on the door. It didn't look like steel to him. It looked like hard candy. Jack didn't punch the wall. He didn't kick it. He simply leaned forward, opened his mouth, and bit down on the lock. The entire alien crew froze in horror as a piece of their indestructible ship snapped off in the human's mouth. They realized too late that they had made a terrible mistake. They kidnapped the only species in the galaxy whose bite force is stronger than their hull armor. Jack woke up with a terrible pain in his head. The last thing he remembered was working on the asteroid belt, drilling for iron with his mining crew. There had been a bright flash of light, and then darkness. Now, he was lying on a cold, hard floor. He slowly sat up and looked around. He was inside a small room that looked like a glass box. The walls were completely transparent, allowing him to see a strange, metallic hallway outside. He was trapped. He stood up and felt a wave of dizziness, but his miner instincts told him to check his surroundings immediately. He needed to find a way out. On the other side of the clear wall, Commander Zill stood with his arms crossed. Zill was a tall, insect-like alien with hard green skin and large black eyes. He looked at the human with amusement. To Zill, this cage was the ultimate prison. It was made of steel, the most expensive and powerful material in the galaxy. Steel was famous because it could stop a blast from a heavy laser cannon without getting warm. No creature in the known universe could break through it. Zill felt completely safe standing just inches away from the dangerous human. He believed the human was as helpless as a bug in a jar. Jack did not know about steel or alien technology. He only knew that he was angry and hungry. He walked up to the clear wall and slammed his heavy fist against it. He expected a loud, ringing sound, like hitting thick glass or metal. Instead, the wall made a dull thud. It sounded strange, almost like he had punched a block of hard-dried mud or cheap plastic. Jack frowned. He looked closer at the wall. It didn't feel cold like glass, it felt room temperature and slightly chalky. He raised his hand to hit it again, but this time his wedding ring scraped against the surface. He pulled his hand back and looked at the spot. There was a deep, white scratch on the wall where his gold ring had touched it. Jack's eyes went wide. He touched the scratch with his finger. White powder came off on his skin. He looked at the alien commander, then back at the scratch. The alien thought this wall was unbreakable because it stopped lasers, but Jack realized something very important. This material was not hard, it was just heat-resistant. To a human used to digging through solid rock, this super armor felt surprisingly soft. A plan began to form in Jack's mind. Commander Zill invited his chief scientist, Grix, to the viewing deck to study their new captive. Grix held a data pad that displayed a detailed scan of Jack's body. The two aliens looked at the holographic image and laughed quietly. To them, the human looked incredibly weak. He had no hard shell to protect his organs, no sharp claws on his fingers, and no spiked tail to swing as a weapon. His skin was soft, pliable, and easily cut. Grix pointed at the screen and explained that the human was mostly made of water and soft calcium. They concluded that Jack was a level 1 threat, which was the lowest possible danger rating in their database. They believed that a simple fall or a strong gust of wind could probably injure him. The aliens then focused their scanner on Jack's head to analyze his biology. They examined his mouth and teeth with curiosity. In Zill's culture, mouths were only used for drinking nutrient liquids or swallowing soft jelly. They did not understand the purpose of Jack's flat, blocky teeth. Grix guessed that the white bones in Jack's mouth were just for decoration, or perhaps they vibrated to help him speak. They completely ignored the thick masseter muscles attached to Jack's jaw. They did not know that humans evolved from ancestors who cracked open hard nuts, chewed through tough meat, and crushed bones. The aliens assumed Jack's bite was as harmless as a gentle kiss. This was a fatal calculation error. Inside the cell, Jack was finished with being confused. Now, he was just angry and extremely bored. He looked at the door hinge where the clear wall met the floor. He crouched down and pressed his thumbnail into the material. To his surprise, his nail sank in. It felt like digging into a bar of hard soap or dried clay. Jack realized that while this alien ship might be advanced, their materials were lightweight and brittle. They were built to survive high-heat energy weapons, not physical brute force. Jack grabbed the door handle and squeezed. It didn't feel solid like steel, it felt light and hollow. Zill watched on the monitor, thinking Jack was leaning on the door for support, completely unaware that the human was testing the structural integrity of their indestructible ship. Jack's stomach rumbled loudly, reminding him that he had not eaten since the kidnapping. He pulled on the bars of the cell door with all his might, but they were too thick to bend with just his hands. His palms were sweaty, and he could not get a good grip on the smooth, white material. He was frustrated. He needed a tool, like a wrench or a pair of pliers, to twist the locking mechanism and break it free. Since he had no tools in his pockets, he realized he had to use the only natural tool he had left. He remembered how he used to open stubborn plastic packages or crack hard nuts back on Earth. He knew that when his hands failed, his jaw rarely did. He leaned his face close to the thin latch that held the door shut. On the bridge, Commander Zill and Grix watched the monitor in total confusion. They saw the human open his mouth wide and place it over the door lock. Zill tilted his head, wondering if the creature was trying to communicate with the door or perhaps smell it. To an alien species that only consumed liquid food through soft straws, the idea of using a mouth as a crushing weapon was unimaginable. They did not know that the human jaw is essentially a biological hydraulic press. They laughed, thinking Jack was losing his mind from the stress of captivity. Zill reached for the intercom to mock the human, but he stopped when he saw Jack's jaw muscles tighten aggressively. Jack positioned the sharp edge of the alien lock between his back molars where his bite was strongest. He took a deep breath and clamped down hard. He felt the resistance of the material, but it was not like biting steel, it was more like biting into a piece of hard, stale chocolate or a block of ice. He applied more pressure, his masseter muscles bulging against his skin. Suddenly, a loud crack echoed through the silent cell. It sounded like a gunshot. A large chunk of the indestructible locking mechanism snapped cleanly off inside Jack's mouth. He immediately spit the piece out onto the floor. It tasted like dry, salty chalk. The broken piece clattered across the ground, and the door, no longer held by the latch, slowly creaked open. Red emergency lights began to flash wildly on the alien bridge, bathing the room in a chaotic crimson glow. Commander Zill stared at the security monitor, his 4 hands shaking uncontrollably. He had seen asteroids crash into his ship, and he had survived battles with pirates, but he had never seen anything like this. To him, the video feed showed a nightmare. The soft-skinned creature had not just escaped, it had consumed the Xersteel lock. Zill screamed to his crew that the human was a metal eater. Panic spread instantly among the aliens. They believed that if the human could eat the door, he could eat the walls, the floor, and eventually the engine itself. They imagined the human chewing a hole through the ship and venting them all into the cold vacuum of space. They were no longer guarding a prisoner, they were trapped with a monster. Down in the corridor, Jack stepped out of the glass cage. He wiped his mouth with his sleeve, spitting out the last few grains of white dust. The alien metal tasted terrible, like dry chalk mixed with salt. He needed water desperately. He started walking down the hallway, looking for a control room or a kitchen. Suddenly, 2 alien guards turned the corner. They looked like large, armored beetles holding silver rifles. Upon seeing Jack, they chirped in high-pitched surprise and raised their weapons. Jack reacted on pure instinct. He grabbed a loose panel from the broken door frame to protect himself. He pulled it hard, and with a loud crack, the panel ripped away from the wall as if it were made of cardboard. The guards fired bright blue beams of energy at him. The lasers hit the panel in Jack's hand with a hiss. The panel glowed red and absorbed the heat perfectly, just as it was designed to do. The energy weapons were useless against the heat-resistant material. However, Jack found the panel too large and clumsy to hold. In a moment of frustration, he smashed the panel against his knee. The indestructible alien shield snapped in half with a sound like a dry branch breaking. Jack now held two jagged pieces of the wall as clubs. The guards stopped shooting immediately. They were paralyzed with fear. They had just watched their powerful lasers fail to scratch the shield, yet the human had broken that same shield like a twig. Screaming in terror, the guards dropped their rifles and ran away. The alien guards retreated behind the heavy blast doors at the end of the corridor. They punched a code into the keypad, and the massive doors slid shut with a hiss. Commander Zill, watching from the safety of the bridge, finally relaxed his tense shoulders. He announced to his crew that the human was finally stopped. These blast doors were the thickest part of the ship. They were designed to withstand the heat of a direct impact from a solar flare. Zill was certain that no biological creature could pass through them. He believed the human would simply tire himself out by banging on the heavy barrier until he fell asleep. The crew began to calm down, believing their technology had finally won. Jack arrived at the dead end and looked at the sealed door. He pounded on it with his fist, but this time nothing happened. The material was too thick to break with a simple punch. He looked around the hallway for another option. He did not want to give up and go back to the cell. His eyes landed on a thick pipe running along the wall near the ceiling. It looked like a conduit for air or water. Jack knew that if he had a lever, he could force the door open. He reached up and grabbed the pipe, but it was held tight by strong clamps. He tried to pull it, but his fingers slipped. He needed to cut the clamp, but he still had no knife. Without hesitating, Jack grabbed the wall bracket with his teeth. He bit down on the fastener that held the pipe in place. The alien material crunched instantly, crumbling like a dry biscuit. He spit out the pieces and ripped the long pipe off the wall. Now he had a long, sturdy bar. He jammed the end of the pipe into the small crack between the blast doors. He planted his feet firmly on the ground and pulled on the pipe with all his weight. Physics was on his side. The pipe acted as a giant lever, multiplying his strength. On the bridge, the silence was broken by a terrifying sound over the speakers. It was not the screech of bending metal, but the loud crack of shattering stone. Zill watched in horror as the blast door splintered. A huge crack appeared down the center of the door. Jack gave one final pull, and the invincible blast door shattered into large chunks of white debris. The aliens gasped. They realized their ship was not built to fight a creature with internal bones and dense muscles. To them, Jack was an unstoppable force of nature who could dismantle their entire ship with his bare hands and teeth. The automatic doors to the command bridge slid open with a soft hum, revealing the nightmare of the alien crew. Jack stepped inside, looking like a dusty ghost. He was covered from head to toe in fine white powder from the shattered blast doors. He was breathing hard from the physical effort, and his stomach was growling louder than the ship's engines. To the crew, he looked like a destroyer who had just walked through walls to get to them. Every single alien on the bridge froze instantly. They dropped their data pads and huddled together against the far wall, shivering in fear. They expected the human to roar or attack with laser weapons, but he just stood there, wiping the dust from his eyes and looking extremely annoyed. Commander Zill was nowhere to be seen at first. Then, a trembling voice came from underneath the main navigation desk. Zill slowly crawled out, holding all four of his hands up in total surrender. He begged for mercy, explaining rapidly that their flesh was soft, full of toxins, and would taste terrible. He was convinced that the metal eater had come to the bridge to feast on the crew. Jack looked at the terrified captain inside. The adrenaline was fading, and now he just felt tired. He walked past the trembling aliens and approached the captain's chair in the center of the room. It was made of the same white, chalky material as the rest of the ship. Jack sat down heavily, resting his arms on the command console. To make sure the aliens understood exactly who was in charge, Jack leaned down toward the armrest of the captain's chair. He opened his mouth and bit a large chunk out of the chair's edge. Crunch. The sound echoed through the silent bridge. He chewed the dry material for a second and then spit the white dust onto the floor right next to Zill's feet. The aliens gasped in horror. Jack looked at Zill and gave a simple command. He told them he didn't want to eat bugs, he wanted a steak and a ride home. The crew scrambled to obey him instantly. They punched the coordinates for Earth faster than they had ever worked before. As the ship turned around, the aliens learned a permanent lesson: never kidnap a species whose bite force is stronger than your spaceship.